verses here. The verses on the board.
Yes.
Purport is awesome.
See verse. Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimati Bhakti Vedanta Swami Iti Namine Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Puchayane Nirvisesa Sunyavadi Tostyatya Sutane Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasadi Gaura Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. So this verse is from Srimad Bhagavatam. It's from the first canto, 8th chapter, verse number 18. And the Bhagavatam is full with prayers by great personalities. And these prayers are to glorify the Lord, glorify the process of devotional service, and glorify the great personalities. And so this chapter is one of the first and more prominent chapters in the Bhagavatam, which describes beautiful prayers. And this is by a great personality called Mother Kunti, which is also known as Queen Kunti. She is the mother of the Pandavas, and she's the mother of 3 of the Pandavas. And she is a great personality. She has a lot of devotion to the Lord. And here in this whole chapter, one verse after another, she describes many of the mysterious characteristics of the Lord's qualities. And this is a beautiful verse. Kunti Uvacha. Can you want to chant together? Kunti Uvacha.
Kunti Uvacha.
Namaste Purusham Tvadhyam.
Namaste Purusham Tvadhyam.
Ishvaram Prakrite Param.
Ishvaram Prakrite Param.
Laksham Sarvabhutanam.
Laksham Sarvabhutanam.
Antirbahi Avastitam.
Antirbahi Avastitam.
And the translation is, let me switch to the next page. Okay. Srimati Kunti said, "O Krishna, I offer my obeisances unto you because you are the original personality and are unaffected by the qualities of the material world." No monkeys allowed, come on. Somebody do something because this is the... Srimati Kunti said, "O Krishna, I offer my obeisances unto you because you are the original personality and unaffected by the qualities of the material world. You are existing within and without everything, yet you are invisible to all." And here she's talking to Krishna directly. Krishna is standing in front of her. And she's saying, "I offer my respects. You are the original personality of Godhead. The material world does not affect you in any way. You are within everything, and at the same time you are without everything. At the same time you are not visible to anyone." Very interesting glorification. Okay. You have to be able to keep going as I keep going. Okay, this is a very long discussion, what we say Srila Prabhupada's purport. And Kunti Devi was aware that Krishna is the original personality. He was playing the part of a nephew. But an enlightened lady, she could not make a mistake by offering her obeisance to the nephew. Therefore, she called him the original personality beyond the material cosmos. You have to keep going. Back on. Okay, now go 1-4. Although all living entities are transcendental, they are neither original nor infallible. So she's describing the Lord as being the original person, the source of everything, and He is infallible. We are also living beings, but we are not original, and we are fallible. Us, the living entities, fall down because of the influence of the material energy. But the Lord, as described in the Vedas, because He is the chief among all living entities, is the source of all living entities. He controls all the great personalities, such as Chandra and Surya. Next. And also, He is the Ishvara, and no one is greater than Him. He is the supreme Ishvara. He's present before her as her nephew, but at the same time, He says, I'm situated in everyone's heart. And one who remember me, one who always remember me, is aware of everything and never forgets. Therefore, the Vedas know me, I am the knower of the Vedas, I can follow the Vedas. So the Lord is describing how He is the source of everything. Queen Kunti is now affirming that. And He is within and without, yet He remains invisible. I'm going to ask you a question. Give me a material example of something that is both within and without and is invisible at the same time. Think about it. What is the material example? Because God is saying He is within and without everything, but at the same time, He's invisible to all.
Air?
Air. Perfect. Air is outside, you can't see it. It's also within you, you can't see it. But it exists, we know air exists. So in the same way, God exists within everything. And He's also within the light, within the hearts of all living beings. Okay. And this seems to be very difficult to understand, but when you use that example of the air, we can understand these things easily. And then it goes on to describe how He entered the womb of one great soul called Uttar, and He saved her embryo from being destroyed by one enemy named Asvatana. He can appear anywhere at any time, but at the same time He reserves the right to do it whenever He wants. He only appears to those who are His devotees, who have surrendered their lives to Him in devotion. He doesn't appear to anyone. But everyone knows He exists everywhere, but at the same time He's not seen by everyone. Okay? I was just summarizing that explanation. So it's very important to understand it. And you look around, and you see, sometimes we're driving in the car, and we're looking around and we see billboards and we see people and we see cars, we see roads, we see buildings. We see so many varieties of things in the environment. But what are they? They're the energy of God. We make a distinction, oh, this is a car, this is a road, this is a person. But behind the obvious description is that each of these entities or forms that we see are a combination of the Lord's energy. Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita that the material energy is simply made up of eight elements: earth, water, fire, air, ether, which are the physical gross elements. These are the ones you can perceive with your senses. You can see dirt, you can see earth, you can see water, you can see fire. Air you can't see, but it exists. And then of course even more subtle than the air is sky. Sky is even more subtle than air. And then there's the mind, and then the intelligence, and then the sense of identity yourself, or material identity. That's called the false ego. So these 8 elements make up everything material. So everything you see is a combination of these 8 elements, that's all. Your body is made out of 5 gross elements and 3 subtle elements, that's all. But who are you? You are that soul that exists within the body, that moves the body. So when you see the environment in front of you and everything is moving, you can understand there's a spiritual energy that's pushing everything. Because matter is dead. It cannot move on itself. So that energy that is moving that is the spiritual energy. And God is the source of that spiritual energy in His personal form, but He is also manifested in His impersonal form as the force which drives all the material energy. A good example would be the sun. When you see the sun, you can see the disk is in the sky, it's in one place. But the light of the sun is everywhere when there's no clouds. Even if there's clouds, the light of the sun is above the clouds. It's not restricted by the clouds. In the same way, God exists and His energies are everywhere, making everything happen through His various energies. And we are one of those energies that's moving things in this world. We are called His separated part and parcel. We're separated because we're in the material energy, and therefore we are, what we say, controlled by the energy that we are influencing. Although we move matter, matter controls us. Why is matter controlled us? Because we're separated from the source. As soon as we connect back with our source, then we can control, we cannot be influenced by the movements of the material energy. Because we are greater than the material energy, we are spirit, and the material energy is material. And so, Queen Kunti, she's trying to show how the Lord is both within and without, both in His personal form and in His energies, both with everything. Using my example of the sun is everywhere in its, what we say, energy forms, in the form of sunshine. But God is a little different. He is both there in His energy, but He's also there in His personal form. If God wants to appear anywhere, He can appear in this room right now because He's already here. He doesn't have to come from a long distance, take an EasyJet flight, and land into Ljubljana, go through the check-in and get his baggages and then get into a car and then it'll take some time to get it. Now, He's personally already here in His form as Krishna, but we cannot see Him because we don't have the eyes to see it. Just like we can't see the air, but we know the air exists. And there's a lot of things we don't see, but they exist. So people sometimes say, well, you have to show me God, but then you have to say, are your eyes qualified to see God? And it says that by devotion to the Lord, one develops the qualities to see the Lord, and not otherwise. It's just like, if you go from one country to another, in some cases you need a visa, you need a passport for sure, but then you definitely need a visa in some places. You can't just enter that area, that country, unless you have the proper papers. So we have to have the qualifications to see God, although He's everywhere, and within everything, and at the same time outside of everything, simultaneously. And so, what are those qualifications? That's devotion. When one engages in devotion to the Lord, sings the glories of the Lord, engages in using one's energy, we have what we say, we have intelligence, we can use that to serve the Lord. We have our words, we can speak about the Lord. We have our resources, we can use them to contribute to the Lord's temples. And we also have our life, we can use our life in different ways to engage in the service of the Lord. So as we do that, we become less affected by the coverings of the material energy and become more aware of Krishna's presence within the energy that's all around us. But it is a gradual process. It starts and it develops through chanting of the holy names of the Lord, because the holy name of the Lord is that energy that is the Lord Himself in sound. God's name and God are the same. Yeah. This is the quality of something spiritual. Something material, the name is different than the object. If you want water, you just chant water, you get more thirsty, that's all. But when you want Krishna, or you want to associate with Krishna, you can do that gradually through chanting of His holy name. Because His name and Him are the same, there's no difference. This is the difference between something spiritual and something material. Something material is always different than the different aspects of itself. The form, the name, the characteristics are different in different ways. But in the spiritual world, the name of God, the form of God, the activities of God, the qualities of God are all the same with God. And when you come in contact with one of them, you come in contact with all of them, because they're all absolute. This is called absolute. Something that doesn't dualistic. It's hard to perceive something absolute because we live in the world of duality. You can't understand cold unless there is heat. You can't understand beauty unless there's something that's not beautiful. So the opposite defines the opposite. Before you can perceive anything, there's an opposite to that which helps you to perceive that as distinct from something else. As distinct from something else. But in the absolute world, Krishna is not distinct from His name. His name is also Him. But it comes in the form of sound, as opposed to His personal form as Krishna in His deity form, or in His personal form. So by chanting the holy names of the Lord, one enters into the association of the Lord through transcendental sound. And sound is one of the most powerful substances in existence. Even material sound is very powerful. Sometimes you see an example where a person is like a great opera singer, and they have a very high, but a very powerful voice, and they sing and glasses break. The voice is so strong, and at the same time, it's because it's on such a high decibel level. Sound is measured in decibels. The higher you go, the more higher the decibels, the more stronger the sound is. So even in voices can move matter. That's why you see in India, people could go from one place to another simply by chanting mantras. Yogis could chant a particular mantra and leave one place and go to another place without any vehicle, without any conveyances. Simply by traveling by mantra. So sound is very, very powerful. And so the ultimate sound of power is the Maha Mantra, because this mantra contains only the names of God. Whereas other mantras may also contain names of God, but they contain other principles which describe the names of God. But the Maha Mantra, the Hare Krishna mantra, is unique in that it only contains the names of God. That's why it's called Maha. Maha simply means great. And that's the difference between other mantras and the Maha mantra. So to connect with the Lord, one can chant the Lord's name and feel the presence of the Lord through transcendental sound. And that transcendental sound awakens within one knowledge and a type of happiness that comes with the association of that name. So it's all connected with the spiritual energy. So we can bring about the presence of Krishna through sound. And when sound becomes mature or reaches a certain level of absorption, when you're absorbed in the sound, you can actually, the Lord can appear in front of you in his personal form when that sound becomes fully concentrated. And that is called samadhi. Samadhi, that means a complete absorption in the sound. And of course that's a very high state of existence, but there's different stages. There's first concentration, and then there's meditation, and there's absorption, and then there is intense absorption, and then higher than that is samadhi. Samadhi means you're completely oblivious to everything else, and you're absorbed only in the sound. The sound becomes you, you become the sound, you become one with the sound. You keep your identity separately, but it seems like the sound and you are one at the same time. That is called absorption. When one concentrates on that level, then one can perceive the presence of the Lord everywhere. So this is how sound is very powerful. We mentioned how even in the material world, sound can move matter. See, our spiritual master, Srila Prabhupada, was traveling, and he was traveling by airplane, and he came into one place, Dallas, Texas, in America, and he was greeted by reporters there. And one reporter, women reporter, and she said, Prabhupada was talking about how people travel. Because in the Vedas, one can travel by three means: yantra, tantra, and pigeon. There's a thing that's called kopita. Kopita means you train pigeons, and you can fly on the pigeons. If you know how to train the pigeons can carry you from one place to another. And it's a science, it's in the Vedas, people can do that. They use pigeons to transport themselves from one place to another. But there's another thing, it's called mantra. Mantra means that simply by powerful sound vibrations, one can move themselves, their physical self, from one place to another. Sometimes you see even yogis can sit in one place and all of a sudden they go up in the air and then they come down again, just by a sound. But then there's another thing called yantra. Yantra means machine. So Prabhupada said to the reporter, there's three ways to travel: yantra, mantra, and pigeon. So the reporter said, well, why did you travel by TWA Airlines? And Prabhupada said, to become one with you. So if I flew in on mantra, you wouldn't be able to identify so much. Wanted to keep the communications open. But these are ways that one can move like that. So that's why Krishna is everywhere, both inside and outside, because everything is his energy, and his energy is actually, in one sense, non-different at the same different for him. That's why this verse spoken by Queen Kunti is somewhat of a contradiction. How can something be inside and outside at the same time, but at the same time invisible? If it's outside, you should be able to see it, and inside you can't see it. But But then Krishna says, I'm invisible both in and without. So we use a material example to help us understand how Krishna is everywhere at the same time, and at the same time not there. He's there by his energy, but he's not there by his personal form. But if he wants to be there by his personal form, he can also be there. So he appears in his personal form as the deity. When we first came in, we saw beautiful pictures of Radha and Krishna deities up on the screen from different places. So the Lord manifests himself in his personal form so we can see him as the deity. The deity is also a manifestation of God by taking material elements and formulate them in the form of the Lord according to the Vedic scriptures, based on qualified persons who are authorized to do such work. And then we install the deity into the temple. The deity becomes the object of worship. He's not an idol, he's not stone, but it becomes, God enters into the deity and the deity becomes God himself. And we worship the deity like that. Why does the Lord appear in that form? So we can see him and we can serve him in that form. We offer prayers to the deity, and we treat the deity as if it was a person by giving him food, by waking him, putting him to sleep. The deity is not simply an idol that someone's created, but it's actually a manifestation of Krishna's mercy in his personal form as he appears in this world. So these are very hard to understand, but through practice one can understand that. In other words, by worshipping the deity, Krishna reveals himself as the deity through the worshipper. Intellectual, philosophical understanding of spiritual matters take one to a certain level, but cannot give you the realization. Only when you engage in practical service, when you perform the activities, then you can understand the philosophy. The philosophy is like a direction. It shows you in which direction you should think and how you should act, and what is the understanding. When you apply the philosophy in a practical way, then you start getting an understanding of how the philosophy actually is working every day in your life. But it takes activity. So therefore, there's two types of knowledge, or two aspects of knowledge. One is called Gyan, philosophical, theoretical understanding, and one is called Vigyan. Vig comes from the word Vishita, or Vishva, Vishita, which means intensification of knowledge. So when knowledge becomes intensified, it becomes realization. What is intensification of knowledge? It's like when you know something automatically. I can tell you something, and you can agree or not agree. But when you know something, no one can take that away from you. When you know something is correct. Sometimes we say that's intuition. So realized spiritual knowledge is similar to intuition. When something is not, there's no doubt anymore, you know it simply by the experience. And not so much simply by the philosophy. You might say, to use a very simple example, you're eating, but at a certain point you become satisfied, and then you say, I'm satisfied, I don't want it anymore. Someone else will say, no, you should have more. You say, no, I'm satisfied. They can't understand you're satisfied, but you can, by your experience. So, transcendental knowledge is an experience beyond just the words that we hear that describe the knowledge. And that knowledge takes one to spiritual consciousness. Okay. So when we apply the philosophy in practical application, we get the result of that. And to learn how to perform the practical application, one needs guidance. Guidance from those who can teach one. Sometimes we call that the spiritual master, the guru. Guides one to practice the philosophy in a proper way where the results are are guaranteed. Just doing things is nice, but doing it in the right consciousness and in the right way is completely different than just doing something. So that's where the guidance is required. So that helps us to get the realization of the knowledge. So we say God is everything, and this verse by Queen Kunti really sums it up. Yes, God is everything, He's within everything, He's outside of everything, He controls everything, and He is the source of everything. Ultimately, there's nothing outside of Him. There's only two things that are in existence, God and God's energies. That's all. We are an energy of God, this world is an energy of God, and all these energies are working by the will of the Lord. Parasya Sakti Virahaya Suyate Svabhavika Jnana Palakriya Cha. If the Lord wants something to happen, He simply directs His energies in that way and it happens. But He's not like a big think director. He simply wills something. He just wants it to happen. When He wants it to happen, the energies are so much connected to Him that they carry out His will automatically. You might use an example. You have a person who owns a big corporation. He might be playing golf someplace or going swimming, but the corporation is going on because they're following His direction. He has set it in place, and He's put His employers in place, and they're working according to His instructions. So although He's not personally involved with making things happen, He's doing it through His energies. So in the same way, God is making everything happen through His energies. But His energies are connected to Him, and therefore, in one sense, His energy is the same as Him, but at the same time, not the same. As the sunshine is the same as the sun, but at the same time, not the sun. So this is transcendental knowledge. When we know that, and we can understand that if everything is God and everything is controlled by God, well, what do I do? What's my position? Your position is to serve God and to develop your relationship with God. And then, when you do that, then gradually you can understand how everything is working, and you actually start to understand yourself. Distinct from your body, you understand yourself as a spiritual being. And what is your relationship with God? That is also there. So all these are there in the Srimad Bhagavatam, Queen Kunti's prayers. As you go through this chapter, there are more and more wonderful prayers that Queen Kunti offers to the Lord, glorifying the Lord in different ways. So to glorify the Lord is one of the ways to serve the Lord. To offer nice prayers to the Lord, to glorify the Lord's names, His qualities, His activities, His various ways that He deals with people in this world. Glorification is one of the most elevated forms of service to the Lord, to glorify the Lord. Because the Lord is all glorious. Everything about Him is wonderful. And when we glorify the Lord, we actually feel our connection with the Lord. It's almost like when you speak nicely of someone, you almost feel their presence when you do that. And if they are personally present when you do that, the connection with that person becomes stronger. So, it's like using an material example. Okay, so I think I summed up some of the main points of that verse. If there's any questions or comments? It's understandable? Everyone understood it?
Yes. No, we have to contemplate on it.
Okay, we got, yes, Jyotirmaya.
We're mentioning how the authorized process of installing the deity involves the presence of God in that particular material elements. How about the forms of God which are not formally installed? Practically everyone has some murti of Krishna in his home. One sense also like deity, or is more like idol?
You're talking about two ways to install the deity. You're talking about two ways to install the deity. One is called Pranapratishtha, which is the formal elaborate ceremony for establishing the deity in the temple, which is done with mantras and priests and various sacrifices. And then there's another kind of installation, it's called time. Time means that if you have a deity in your house, and if you worship that deity regularly, and adhere by the rules of worship, gradually the deity becomes an installed deity through the process of your bhakti, your devotion, and the element of time. So that doesn't require the formal ceremony, but it is considered an authorized form of worship. By worshipping the Lord regularly, according to the rules and regulations of worship, after a while that deity is also considered to be officially the form that it represents. In other words, if you have Jagannath there and you worship Jagannath for some time, maybe a year or two, actually then Jagannath manifests himself through that form. Or if the form becomes him, he becomes the form more different. So it's called time. Now, the scriptures don't really say what is that time period, but the time period is more or less by the strength of one's devotion. The stronger the devotion, the quicker the time period. Okay? That was a practical question.
You were talking about how in this material world we can understand by the opposite things like heat and cold. Right?
Yeah.
So will we understand Krishna more because we experience this material?
Well, you can, if you suffer in the material world, one of the ways to approach God is because we suffer. So suffering is an impetus, material suffering is an impetus that pushes us towards wanting to free ourselves from suffering, and then we look towards God for that. So you can say, yeah, because with God there's no suffering, but in this world it's suffering. So it's the opposite.
So it's good to suffer.
No, it's good to become Krishna conscious. But if suffering brings you to God, it's good. There goes my recording. Yeah, so if suffering brings you to God, then it's considered good. But if suffering just continues and one does not turn to God, but tries to relieve the suffering in a material way, then suffering just continues. But better than coming to God out of suffering is to coming to God out of knowledge. I know my relationship with God is there. I'm God's part and parcel. I'm His servant. I should serve Him. I should develop my relationship with Him. I should develop my love for Him. That's knowledge. The Bhagavad Gita is Krishna speaking about the knowledge about Himself, about this world, about our relationship with Him. take that knowledge and practically apply that instead of waiting for suffering and then run to God. So suffering is more or less a lower form of moving towards God. Higher than that is knowledge. Come out of knowledge. Okay? Do you have something else you want to add?
Yes, just what about the need of love? If someone turns to God out of need of love.
Yeah, that's perfect. Krishna says, those who come out of knowledge about my relationship with them, that's the highest. That's the best. Those persons make more faster spiritual advancement because sometimes people come out of suffering and then when their suffering goes down, they go back to material life again. So it's better to come from the positive form than from the negative. But anyway you come, it's okay. Yes, you have a question?
How is it the best to approach someone who suffers to tell him about spiritual life, about Krishna?
Well, somebody's suffering. Most people are suffering. Some admit it and some don't. If you mean you want to help somebody?
Yes.
Yeah. This depends. What we usually do is we encourage people to chant. We say, chant and be happy. So by chanting the holy names of God, you can reduce your suffering, you can reduce your stress, you can reduce your anxiety. Because if we put our consciousness in God's name, and then everything else starts to change. The spiritual affects the material and makes the material different. So that's one way to, and give a person a book about philosophy, let them read that book and try to understand more. Thank you. Anything else? Yes.
You mentioned that we can perceive Lord all the time. How could, what kind of chanting, how we should chant to perceive Lord all the time?
Through chanting? Chant with great attention. The mind will wander, but bring the mind back to the sound. Listen to the sound while you're chanting. And as you listen to the sound, your concentration becomes greater and greater. So when your mind wanders, just bring it back to the sound, that's all. The mind will wander, that's the nature of the mind. It's going to go. Krishna talks about that in the Bhagavad Gita. The mind is unsteady, turbulent, always restless. Going from one thing to another, that's the nature of the mind. But if we keep the mind connected to the sound, just remember, oh, let me hear, let me hear, let me hear. Or pray to the Lord, please help me to hear your name better. Then that helps you to concentrate more. So this is why we call it japa meditation. It's not just chanting mantras, it's meditating on the sound, hearing the sound. We call it sound meditation. Concentrate on sound. The problem with most of us is because the sounds of this world are not very pleasant, and therefore our mind rejects hearing all these sounds. And sometimes blocks sound automatically because sound is very unpleasant or disturbing or something. So we have a tendency to block out sound because the way we live in this world is under so many crazy sounds around us. The mind just blocks it out. Although it hears it, it doesn't really get, when we say, absorbed in it. But at the same time, when you chant the spiritual names, then we should really concentrate on the sound. But because we're so accustomed to blocking sounds with our mind, we have to practice hearing. Just keep practicing, keep practicing, keep practicing, keep practicing, keep practicing. Hearing is an art. It's not something you just do. You have to absorb yourself in what you're hearing, and at the same time, when you're hearing philosophy, you hear it, and then you think about it while you're hearing it. Not only you just hear it. And when you're hearing Krishna's name, you don't have to think about it, you just have to just allow that sound to enter. That's all. It's practice. You have to practice. Spiritual life is simply practice. The thing is, if you practice and then you stop practicing, you practice and stop practice, it becomes very slow. To get the effects, you have to continually practice. Just like if you want to be a good musician, you sit down, you might practice for an hour a day. But some people practice 8 hours a day. So one becomes really determined to learn music, they spend more and more time and more energy practicing, as opposed to someone who's not so enthusiastic, only does it for an hour. So who's going to be a better musician? Person who gives more time and energy to the practice. Same with Krishna's spiritual life. How much time, how much energy you give to it, is how much you get out of it. Practice. But when you practice for a while, you start to like it. And when you like it, you want to do more of it. So the practice doesn't become just a routine, it becomes something you want to do. Becomes nice. Okay. Is there anything else?
I have another
Yeah,
question.
fine. We're still here.
What exactly are the differences between mind and ego?
The ego is your false sense of self. Because there's two kinds of egos, real ego and false ego. False ego is what you identify yourself in a material way. I'm a man, that's false ego. I'm young, that's false ego. I'm educated, that's false ego. I'm good at this, that's false ego. Real ego means I am a spiritual being, part of God. That's your real identity. Then you have your material identity, which is called false, which means it's temporary. It comes and goes. Your spiritual identity doesn't come and go, it's eternally you. The mind is the source of all emotions and desires. So the mind directs us in a certain way due to its desires and emotions. The mind more or less takes charge, and we give what they call facility to the mind to do what it wants, and it does what it wants. It takes us here, it takes us there, it takes us there, taking you, the soul, in different places. So the mind thinks about something, likes it or doesn't like it, does it or doesn't do it. These are the functions of the mind, based on what my desires are and what my emotions are. And the mind is the seat of all. But then again, the mind you have is the same mind you had in your last life and your life before. Your physical body changes. You get a new physical body every life, but you keep the same mind in life after life. So what you've experienced in your last life is in your unconscious part of your mind. Even the psychologists say there's conscious and unconscious parts of the mind. So the unconscious part of the mind is greater than the conscious part of the mind. Our conscious mind is about 10% of our mind, and the other 90% is unconscious. Means that our experiences and activities in previous lives are hidden within the unconscious part of our mind. Sometimes they come out in dreams. Like that. So that unconscious part of the mind, or the mind itself, directs us to another body. So whatever your consciousness at the time of death is, and you go, that takes your soul into another body, and then you begin your next life. You start again. So the idea to stop that thing, life after life, going from one material situation to another, is to raise your spiritual consciousness. That dissolves your material consciousness, and then your spiritual consciousness takes you to the spiritual world, back to Krishna.
Are then desires of soul and mind the same desires, or are they separate?
No, the mind has its own program.
And who's in charge then?
Huh?
Who's in charge then?
The mind, he's in charge. He's not supposed to be in charge, but he takes over. So how can you control your mind? By your intelligence. Your intelligence is finer than the mind. It's even stronger than the mind. But the intelligence has to be directed by knowledge. I'll give you an example between the intelligence and the mind. You can really identify with this. You're standing high up on a building, and you're looking down, and the mind says, jump. The intelligence says, no. See the difference? So you can actually see the difference between your mind and your intelligence. The mind says, go punch that guy. And the intelligence says, he's bigger than you. So our intelligence connects our soul with God. So having spiritual intelligence means to direct the mind towards God. Otherwise, the mind will do what it wants. It'll take you throughout the universe and back. And the mind gets us in trouble. You have to control that mind by spiritual intelligence, and that spiritual intelligence will connect you to the Lord. If we listen to our mind, we're listening to a thief. Thief says, I'm honest. You can trust me. And then you're in trouble. So we need to, but when you practice using your intelligence to direct the mind gradually becomes purified, and it starts to work according to the soul. But because the mind is so strong and very difficult to control, it requires constant intelligence to keep it in the right direction. If you get a hold of your mind, don't let it go. As soon as you let it go, it can cause you trouble again. I mean, look what people's minds do to them. People come into a high school with a machine gun and start shooting up everybody. Happens all the time. People go crazy. People say things, do things. It's all because of the reckless mind. But the intelligence can direct the mind, but the intelligence has to be directed by knowledge, spiritual knowledge. You get spiritual knowledge from scripture, you get spiritual knowledge from the Guru. Okay, is that helpful?
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah.
So when we change the body, do we keep the intelligence too, or just
Yeah. We keep three things: the intelligence, the mind, and the material's identity. This is called the subtle body. The subtle body carries the soul to the next physical body. The physical body's gone. That ends with, that's called death. That means the physical body is no longer functioning, it dies. But the mind, intelligence, and the false ego continue. It's an energy, it's a material energy, and it directs, based on the nature of the mind directs one in a certain direction. So, and whatever activities you perform in this life, you're building your future life. Right now. What you do, what you think, what your desires are, you're formulating your next body right now. If you change your activities from material to spiritual, then you're formulating your spiritual body. If you keep your activities material, then you're formulating your next material body. It's actually happening every moment. We're actually building our future by what we do in the present. Because the future is simply the combination of what happened in the past and what you're doing in the present. And that makes the future. So direct your intelligence towards Krishna, and then you purify your material existence, and you develop your spiritual body. Very scientific. It's all explained in the Bhagavad Gita. Krishna explains that in the second chapter of Gita. Okay? Philosophy without religion is mental speculation, and religion without philosophy is fanaticism. So religion and philosophy have to go hand in hand. Or we might say philosophy or religion without philosophy is sentiment also, or material sentiment. Yes?
I understand mind and intelligence better. We're like two kind of storages. Mind, some things are stored, and intelligence, some other things are stored. What kind of things are intelligence means remembrance?
Intelligence is discrimination, determination. These are the features of the intelligence. To discriminate what is right, what is wrong, and to become determined to achieve something. Determination is the feature of the intelligence. Srimad Bhagavatam, the third canto, talks about the nature of the mind and the nature of the intelligence. Sleep is the nature of the intelligence. If sleep is less, the intelligence doesn't function to its capacity. If one is too sleepy, then the intelligence is weak.
What kind of things are to another body we bring subtle mind is storage of what kind of things are in there and what kind of things are in intelligence and take that.
The characteristics of the mind and intelligence are the ingredients. There's a difference. What's in your mind and intelligence is what you've accumulated in different lives. The characteristics I just mentioned. The mind is thinking, feeling, and willing. And the intelligence is determination, discrimination, sleep.
Subconsciousness, we take our feelings about some things, like we have some fears from past lives.
Yeah. You're carrying what you did in this life, and you're carrying certain elements of what you did in last life. When you take birth, you don't start from zero. You're bringing in your last karmic collection at the time of birth, and then you start from there. Everyone's different, even at the time of birth. But what you feed that either makes something grow or don't grow. our social environment is not simply our conditioning. Social environment works on what we already have and it moves it in one way or another. Our parents, our friends, all these things, the social environment is moving something that is already there, but it's not developed. It's in a seed form. Because the body is so small. And a baby can't rationalize, can't think so clearly. But as it grows, it takes in or doesn't take in. Some kids are really quiet and peaceful when they're nice, and some kids just like to destroy your whole house. Children are different because they're coming in from different karmic collections from previous lives. Some children learn real fast, some children never learn. It's all passive past karma, that's all. Is that hard to understand? Are you the same as everybody else? Okay. So that means you started with something different and you grew into what you are now. That's continuation. Krishna says, life after life, you're taking body after body. What is that verse from the Bhagavad Gita? 2:13. Dehinosmin yata dehe kovrmyovan idati hantara praktir dhirastitona. As the embodied soul passes from boyhood to youthhood to old age, simply the soul passes into another body at death. The self-realized soul is not bewildered by all the changes. We're changing bodies even now. From youth, where baby's body is no longer there. Now you have a young man's body, soon you get a middle-aged body, and you get an old body. Then that's gone, and then you get a new body again. Start again. Keeps going until you actually come to the spiritual world. Then no more bodies, no more material bodies. So in each life, you're thinking, you're doing this, you're meeting this people, you're just going from life to life, doing various types of material activities, and you're building your material desires and experiences. And that carries with you, life after life. Stop it. Go back to the spiritual world. That's what Krishna wants. He's waiting for you to come back. Why are you hanging around here for? You like it here? I mean, with devotees it's not so bad. But still, you have to get old, get disease, and you have to die again. And then you have to start all over again, and your mother's going to change your diapers, and you're going to pass stool all over the place. And you're going to cry like a little, you start all over again. You have to keep going, because this is what you want. You want to stay in this world and try to enjoy here. And if you want that, you get it. Sometimes you're a demigod, sometimes you're a demon, sometimes you're a plant, sometimes you're a human, sometimes you're a dog, sometimes you're a cockroach. The soul is changing bodies life after life. Bodies are there, the soul is the same. So aren't you tired of that? You're not tired of it yet. Let us know when you get tired of it. Then Krishna gives you some suffering. He says, oh, you want to stay here? Here. Boom, here, take that. Gives you a kick, so it reminds you that it's not so nice here. You fall in love, and then you just fall. That's all. You fall in love and it doesn't work out and you're miserable. This is the way life is, one misery after another. It's like, why is it like that? Well, you might say, why is the prison cell not nice? Because it's a prison cell. That's why. Because the material world is a place where the living entities are being punished for leaving the spiritual world and trying to enjoy separate from God. So that's it. So you can be a first-class prisoner, second-class prisoner, third-class prisoner. You might say, well, I'm a first-class prisoner, it's not so bad. You're still a prisoner. Why stay in jail? Some people actually like it in jail because they can't function in the free world. They think jail is better. I'm getting free meals, I have my own bed, I got television. I get Jell-O every once in a while. So yeah, the rich and very successful people are first-class prisoners in this world. People who are poor, being beaten by the material energy in various efforts, they're third-class prisoners, and there are people in between. But everyone's locked up by the material energy, because the material energy controls, and one cannot get out unless Krishna helps you to get out. Unless you want to get out. You want to get out? Okay. I'm just checking. It's good. Because if you don't want to get out, this whole lecture is useless. Yes.
Does Krishna lead us according to our desires of our souls or desires of our mind?
Krishna
Leads us.
Krishna
gives us,
He's,
fulfills our
he's
desires.
leading you through your intelligence. Through your intelligence. He leads you through your intelligence.
Like he fulfills the desires of our souls.
He's fulfilling your desire, but he's going to bring you to the spiritual realm through your spiritual intelligence. Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, Sarvasya Hamridisani Visto Matab Smritir Jnanam Apohanam Cha. I give you knowledge, I give you remembrance, and I also help you forget. So if you want to forget, Krishna helps you. If you want to remember, he helps you. If you want knowledge, he also helps you. It depends on what you want. He's going to fulfill your desires. He's going to help you desire the right thing, but ultimately you have to choose. He won't force you, but he encourages you to do the right thing. But still, you always have your independence. You can choose. Because the basis of love is the basis of choice, not the basis of force. Krishna will not force you. But he'll make it attractive so you choose the right thing. That's it. But if you don't want him, then whatever you want, he'll help you get that also. That's why everyone is doing so many things, because that's what they want. Krishna's supplying the things that they need to do what they want to do. He's the supplier also. He makes things happen through his energies. So if you want him, he helps you. If you want to stay in this world, he gives you the intelligence how to become a good materialist. But he goes out of his way to change your mind by he sends the spiritual master, he sends his deity, he sends Prasadam, he sends the holy name, he sends the scriptures, he sends so many things to encourage us to come back. But still he gives you the independence. he has a good advertising firm. It's like you see an advertisement, you might be attracted to it, but unless you actually go for it, you don't get the object. So Krishna is trying to attract you back, but still you have to choose. You have to make that choice. And the more you make that choice, the more he helps you move in that direction. So you might say your success depends on your desire. And your desire moves you to do different things. If you desire Krishna, you'll associate with devotees, because those devotees also desire Krishna. So in the association of devotees, your desire for getting Krishna becomes fulfilled, stronger. If you desire to be something else, then you'll associate with those persons who are like that. Question in the back?
Can I still? I wanted to ask, we could say we are in material world in ignorance. So we could say that somehow it seems a little bit unfair because we are not completely familiar with predicted consequences of our actions. But we get the reactions, but we don't know exactly what all the reactions are going to be, but we still have to choose and we still have to act. So can you maybe comment on this?
You can learn from it. You can learn two ways. You learn from experience, or you learn from other people's experience, or you learn by knowledge. Sometimes they say experience is the best teacher. And then there's another phrase, it says a fool learns by no other means. So if you have to get kicked and learn the hard way, that hurts. Better to take the knowledge given by Krishna through the scriptures and through the spiritual master and avoid the experience. So a devotee thinks, oh, if I act like this, if I do like this, this will happen. Sometimes you see people, they want a different result to their activities, but they don't change their activities. They're forced to act in a certain way, and then they wonder why to get the same thing happens all the time. Because you're doing the same thing. So as soon as you change your activities, you also change how things come. But in order to keep moving in the right way, we have to change our desire. And desire is strengthened by knowledge and by association. You can't give up desire, you just change desire from wrong desire to right desire. That's all. Does that help? Just desire Krishna, that's all. And then you can avoid all these other things. And when you desire Krishna, if you're still going through some difficulty, they're just lessons that you need to learn as you're going towards Krishna, that's all. They're small little difficulties, but if you don't desire Krishna and you simply desire things in this world, you might find yourself in very difficult situations. And you're without the Lord's protection because you refuse to accept His protection, so you're on your own. So anything could happen. But when you desire Krishna, and even if you go through some material difficulties, it's just to teach you something, to help you become more devoted, to help you become more surrendered, like that. So just change your desire from material to spiritual. So. And then you'll be moving in the right direction. And gradually all these material difficulties will be gone. finished. I see you're thinking. I can't tell what you're thinking though.
I don't have my glasses, so I'm not
Oh, okay.
seeing you. I'm sorry.
I look like the Brahma Jyoti, huh? Well, hearing is more important than seeing anyway. Okay, so moving on. So thank you very much. Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai. Srimad Prabhupada ki jai.